Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Roundup. Of course, I'm flying solo this week, and I've got a bunch of interesting stories for you today, so let's just get stuck in. Alright, Riot Games and the same Californian department that is going at Blizzard. There's actually been an update. Now, if you want the overall situation there, of course, the department was looking into Riot for basically loads of the same things as, as Blizzard was in trouble with. Now, eventually, there was a settlement out of court that would have seen $10 million go to 1,000 plaintiffs, right? This is just about, not just sexual harassment and stuff like that, but also systemic issues when it comes to equal pay and hiring and promotion, that sort of thing. Now, whenever that settlement happened, the department stepped in, even though they were already running their own investigation, and they claimed that the woman actually could be entitled to over $400 million in back pay. Now, it says the woman. I imagine that's just going to include anybody who was, fell foul of these practices. And they also alleged that basically in a company with a bunch of issues, that settlement didn't really mention any, enforceable changes to their practices and stuff like that. So that was one of the more recent sort of big blips in this case. There is also, relatively recently, the whole thing of, in March 2021, their board found no wrongdoing by the CEO amid the harassment claims, and at that time, Riot were filing to speed up the court proceedings. So that means we're probably due some very, more proper news soon on this. Now, I suppose as a part of the workup to all of this stuff going on, the department has actually accused Riot of basically failing to notify their employees that the employees are actually able to speak to the government about their issues. Of course, the company, if they were to tell people they can't speak to the government, that's what we call illegal. So don't do that. That's basically what's happened. The department have asked the courts to compel Riot's compliance with the June 4th court order requiring the company to send notice to its workers about their right to speak. That's basically that, and a part of this comes from arbitration agreements and stuff, so I'll get into it. The important thing is the document also states, women who signed arbitration agreements or other agreements cannot be excluded from the government's case. It's unlawful for your employer to retaliate against you for speaking to the government or otherwise participating or cooperating in a government proceeding. And this is what this latest part of the story is all about, that idea of Riot getting in the way of their staff speaking about their experiences. And in their investigation, the department found language in company/employees settlements that suggested employees could not voluntarily and candidly speak to the government about sexual harassment and other violations. And of course, that's something that the department says has got quite a chilling effect on what the staff will do. And the courts granted the department's request and ordered Riot to issue the notice. Now, that's stuff that happened on June 4th. Riot apparently still hasn't done anything yet, and the department want more court action to get them moving. That said, Riot did actually respond to the story. They basically said back to The Verge that the severance notices for former employees never prohibited people speaking to government agencies, and the Riot spokesperson also refuted the department's claims regarding the settlement language potentially warning employees from speaking to the government, and that spokesperson actually shared a screenshot of the severance agreement with The Verge and stated, nothing in this agreement prohibits you from reporting possible violations of federal or state law or regulation to any government agency or entity. And apparently that phrasing has been part of the standard language in their severance agreements for years. So that's what Riot says. That certainly seems compelling for the past staff. I guess it's the notice being sent to the current staff that's the issue here. And then they also did reply to PC Gamer saying that, well, the way that they're characterizing it is that this is them, it's a legal matter, and their legal team are focusing on that, and the legal matter is about the past, but the rest of the company is focused on the future. And with that, I certainly will say I've heard stories of Riot actually doing the change and things being better. I know of plenty of people who are, women or LGBT or basically people who I don't think would have felt super at home at you could maybe call the old Riot, now seem to be working there and seem to be happy enough. Again, You could have said the same thing for Blizzard a while back, so it's hard to know. Though we certainly have had murmurings of Riot actually trying. I guess it's a sort of thing, no matter what the company does, the legal side of a company will always be trying, like the big defensive play. But honestly, I'm no lawman, so this is far out of my area of expertise. All I will say is that it does seem like things are heating up, and we might get a bunch of rough historical stories from Riot when this actually hits the court case. So, there's that story. And we've got a funny EA story coming up next. So, EA on delisting and relisting games, where they got themselves in, I think, a bit of principles-based hot water, but I think it ended up sort of ending in a decent situation. So recently, 4 classic EA games were delisted and relisted on GOG. Those are Ultima Underworld 1 and 2, Syndicate Plus, and Syndicate Wars. Now, GOG said that they were just removed on the publisher's request. A bunch of people were a little bit frustrated at this happening, and earlier in the month they were relisted on GOG, and, this is the cool bit, they're actually free to download until the 3rd of September. Now, EA said Syndicate and Ultima Underworld are back. It seems that 20 years on, there's still plenty of love for these titles, so we're pleased to confirm that effective immediately, they will be available again in GOG, and we'll be keeping them on the store for the foreseeable future. And to celebrate this, they are offering the games as a free download for 4 weeks. Why in the first place, though? That is the strange thing here. Now, we do have a statement from EA's Executive Vice President for Marketing, Commercial, and Positive Play, Chris, who said this to GameIndustry.biz. When making decisions that affect players, we take the time to review exactly what the potential impacts are and whether they serve the player's best interests. When we delisted Syndicate and Ultima Underworld, we missed that step and so didn't fully consider the player's perspective. You deleted a game that people might like to play. That's the player's perspective. EA, by the way. Okay, now I can understand for, say, Lord of the Rings Battle for Middle-earth 1 and 2. Could be licensing issues there. But come on, man. Freelancer has been abandonware for years. I really like Freelancer, and maybe all those Star Citizen people would like it too because it was Chris Roberts' previous game. But it's just funny, EA saying this, but they've got quite a bit of abandonware just floating around. I mean, the bright side of abandonware is you Google it, you go to the abandonware site, you download it, you patch it, and then you get the game. And I guess morally I can be happy enough because I've got the discs for any abandonware games that I've got. But yeah, a funny enough little situation. And of course, for that example I did with Freelancer, because unfortunately Ultima is just a little bit before my time, but the games like Freelancer, EA, I would have been happy to pay you money for that. So I just wonder, maybe it's a rights thing. Yeah, I just wonder why that story happened. It's a little bit inconsequential, but it is a little bit of a win in that EA tried to remove these games. People were like, hey, no, we like those games. So the game stayed. It's a little bit more pressure, and I think as long as there's people in the community who really care about these games and are willing to put that pressure in, well, those games will be around for longer. That certainly is a good thing. Intel are reportedly entering the high-performance desktop GPU space. Now, this truly is interesting, and it's with Arc, which is an upcoming line of consumer-centric GPUs. So this brand, Arc, is going to cover the hardware and software powering these new discrete GPUs, with the first in line, codenamed Alchemist, expected to release in Q1 of 2022, and rumors are suggesting that it could drop at CES 2022, which of course is in January, with future codenames for the generations being Battle Mage, Celestial, and Druid. And these are going to be desktop and notebook in early 2021. So I guess this is just them trying to fight AMD and Nvidia in this space. We don't know really much here about Alchemist or the rest. They released a snazzy video, and that video did show gameplay in PUBG, Chivalry 2, and Metro Exodus, but it's not like we really know a whole bunch of details. Like how much power is being used, what is the frame rate. We just don't know that stuff yet. That's too early to really expect to. But I think we can roughly guess what performance targets are going to want to hit based on pricing, which we'll cover soon. Now, there are a few features they talk about, real-time ray tracing, things like that. I think one big thing for consumers will be AI-accelerated supersampling, so potentially a response to NVIDIA's DLSS. Of course, DLSS is that seemingly magical way where your game will look and run better because magic. Not literally magic, but it's some real damn cool tech. And of course, back in June, AMD released Fidelity FX Super Resolution, which is FSR, which went down pretty well and is their own answer to DLSS. Now, of course, this is not Intel's first foray into GPUs. They, I believe, had stuff like a long ass time ago, and then more recently the Iris Xe, which is more of a low-performance workstation thing. So the Arc line is basically, if you're a gamer, the thing you're going to care about, which is definitely a good thing. I think just a little bit more competition in that market is certainly a good thing. There's times you do just feel like NVIDIA is just kind of sitting up on top. Plus, the more companies that are putting their heads at this problem, it does make you wonder if that will be good or bad for any silicon shortages that are going on. I suppose you could probably find arguments in multiple different directions there. But overall, it is interesting. Competition's good. And this now means that instead of the R&D departments of NVIDIA and AMD working in GPUs, now there's a whole big R&D department at Intel that's working in GPUs. And if you're interested in good GPUs, that certainly is a good thing. And certainly if you're Intel, you're going to be interested in more money, right? And they very much likely know that the GPU market is big. They know that in the CPU space, they are struggling with die size shrinks. They're struggling in the consumer market, where AMD have had a massive rise as of late. AMD are also found in new consoles. So I think for NVIDIA opening up another line of business where they can be competitive, or for Intel even, I think that does make a good degree of sense. Now, there is zero word in pricing, but Digital Trends estimates it could be in and around $600. So that's like RTX 3070, 3080 space. Again, though, it's just far too early. The only real takeaway here is that Intel are moving into consumer GPUs, likely targeted at, gamers. I mean, come on. Their code names are Battle Mage, Celestial, Druid, and Alchemist. I think they might be targeting the gamers. So yeah, GPUs targeted at us. Q1 2022. Decently exciting. Then next, we've got an interesting money story regarding Outriders. We really do, actually, because it shows just what publishing is actually like. I think you guys are going to learn a whole bunch from this, and certainly I'm used to indie publishing deals. We'll be able to talk more about stuff, at a point in the future, I suppose. So seeing the AAA side is very interesting. Now, of course, Outriders, especially because of Game Pass, even though it was like a very, it's like a good 7 out of 10, but it just kind of went, exploded. Loads of players. I think 3.5 million players. But even with all that success, the developer, People Can Fly, said that they've not got any royalties from the publisher for the game's first quarter sales period. And this has let the studio, basically meant the studios assume that the game hasn't turned a profit. Now, very often in the indie gaming space, if you're at a smaller budget, like, below like a 500k or something, you might have your publishing deal be a 70-30 flip, where, it's 70-30 in the publisher's favor until the cost of, the publishing deal, right? The publishers got their recoup, and then the 70-30 might flip. Like, that's one example, and that means the developer does get like a little trickle of money after launch to be able to support themselves. Another way of doing it, though, is just flat out, you get absolutely nothing until the game has fully recouped for the publisher. Now, often enough in those scenarios, you'll actually be developing the game at a slight profit, right? So, your monthly or whatever payments are like a little bit more than your team is actually spending building the game, because then that gives you that bit of runway after the game has came out. Because the game comes out, but what if it takes a month plus 45 days to get your payments in? It could be an issue for payroll. So with this situation, clearly they have a deal with Square Enix where Square needs full recoup of not only the cost of development, but also the cost of marketing, QA, localization. Those things really do add up. So yeah, there's that. Also, Square Enix, we should note, outright own the Outriders IP. Now, according to the devs, this length of time without a payment probably means that, in Square Enix's opinion, the Outriders game has not exceeded the break-even point. And their CEO outlined that the studio doesn't have any sales figures, but they estimate between 2 and 3 million copies being sold. And that does make sense, because this game was super popular at launch, had 3.5 million uniques during its first month, and of course, it was day and date Game Pass. Now, People Can Fly say this estimate would have actually made the project profitable already in the first quarter of sales, but the lack of a payment means that that's probably not the case in Square Enix's reckoning. Now, the ways that can go pretty much just are that marketing costs were more than expected. QA and localization was more than expected, so it just needs to recoup more money. It could be that money is late coming in from some channels from where the money comes. It could be that. Could be that there's a bit of Hollywood accounting going on. Could be just about anything. That said, I would imagine if a publisher was doing a lot of Hollywood accounting, they get a pretty damn bad rep and wouldn't, devs wouldn't exactly want to work with them. A funny enough situation, though. Now, here's where it gets interesting, because their CEO offered a brief consideration as to the possible reasons, and one of them was the Xbox Game Pass deal. He stated that People Can Fly don't know the details of Square Enix's sales possibility, and that certain partnerships could alter sales figures, and also the costs could have been higher than they thought. And that is just interesting to me, because that is not the level of communication that I would expect from a publisher. I guess things might just be different in that big AAA space, right? Where, yeah, it's a publishing partnership, but maybe it is a little bit more black box between two very big parties with their own legal departments versus a bunch of people, there's legal stuff existing, but just firing emails at each other and having a chat. So quite interesting, those differences in scale. Now, Square Enix themselves praised this game in terms of player acquisition and digital sales. They talked about the digital sales ratio being very high, which they were happy with, and the number of active users being something they were very happy with, and Outriders being on track to be their next major franchise. Now, it's hardly going to be an unprofitable project given that. It just is odd that the dev has not got any royalties in the first quarter. I've got to wonder if Square Enix will actually say anything here. It's not like the developer said this out of rage or anything. I mean, this is all pretty calm and talking to investors, so it's just letting the investors know what's going on. So yeah, I think overall this will be fine. People Can Fly are not actually worried about this. They're emphasizing that Outriders is at the start of its lifespan, and they've got an entire sales tail of Outriders ahead of them, and that they're working on additional dev support and promotional efforts from Square Enix that could help the royalty situation. So it basically seems like it's all fine. I think it's just fun whenever we can talk about the business deals and arrangements that underpin the whole industry. So in a case like this, I guess, yeah, that's just how the deal is. I have to wonder. I've got so little experience and knowledge of those really, really big AAA publishing deals. It's more interesting the indie level. We've had some publishers like Raw Fury actually just for free, or not for free, but publicly put out their publishing, their sort of boilerplate contracts and things like that. I'd say certainly aspects of the Raw Fury one I would ideally like to be a little bit different, but it was good to see that, good to learn. We've of course seen a few other publishing deals and things as well. It will be very interesting to see if we ever get a big AAA one, though. I would absolutely love to know what those things look like in terms of structure, because I imagine they're kind of alien to what a lot of, at least a lot of us in the indie space know. Anyway, that's that. We've got to talk about some games, some business. Really not enough games. That's the shitty bit about doing game industry news right now. It's all just big god-awful calamities. I would say, if you want to hear about some games, check out our Splitgate video. Barely anybody watched it, but goddamn it, we need to talk about good games when they're floating about, because, if we're just talking about this all day, then we're not playing games, are we? So, it's important to talk about this stuff, but we have to have a little bit of balance, I think. Anyway, right. That's it for me. Take care, everyone. I'll see you next time.